Good evening, friends. This is Vishal again. We are in this part of the series where we are continuing how to prepare social issues, which is part of the syllabus GS1, and it is very much important topic for mains as well. We have already discussed earlier topics in which we talked about salient features of Indian society, diversity of India, role of women and women organization, and now we are moving to today we would be discussing the fourth topic, and it is effect of globalization on Indian society. One must know that the globalization topic is all encompassing, and it becomes a very important topic that we need to learn not only in what we call GS paper 1. Along with it, we also have to learn it in social issues, economic issues, ethics also. Even in what we call optional, it becomes an important issues where we have to study about political, economic, social dimension of the impact that globalization had on Indian society. So let's move to towards lecture. So first of all, let's talk about the background in which the globalization process was undertaken. We must first of all be able to define what is globalization. Globalization, in a very simple terms, it it actually means that there is an intensification of the social networks, the what we call the online networks, which was connecting people, and as a result of which impact of one event which is happening at some other part of the country or some other part of the world has an impact on the local events that is happening in some other part of the globe. So basically, one must here understand that the globalization is not a very new process. People have been connecting with each other since earlier times. If you look across the history of India, in ancient India, the Indus Valley civilization had trade relations with Oman and Middle East as well. So that actually shows that globalization is not a very new phenomenon. However, what has changed is the degree of what we call the fastness, the degree, the what we call the pace at which the globalization is taking place. So basically, that actually should clear one doubt that globalization is not a new phenomenon, and it has been happening since the birth of human society. So coming to the question of why this big step of globalization, which is popularly known as the LPG reforms or new economic policy of 1991 occurred. So one must then should have a what we call brief understanding of the type of economy, the type of economic setup that we went with just after independence. Just after independence, we had this mixed type of economy. The mixed type of economy was where government has most of the control over what can be produced, how it should be distributed, and at what cost. So basically, when government has so much control, the entry of private players was pretty much difficult. So there was an entry barrier, as well as there was an exit barrier, because one has to qualify on certain terms before they can go for closing of a certain what we call corporate or industry. Along with that, these are some internal controls that existed in our economy. Apart from that, we had external control as well, in which what was happening is that most of the time, what if most of the time uh, most of the time we had to actually what we call whenever you have to go for whenever one has to go for what we call foreign currency regulation was very much strict. Basically, at that time, currency was actually just fixed format. What we call the currency was very much fixed. So one has to understand that currently we are having what we call floating exchange rate. Instead of floating exchange rate, now at that time we had this floating exchange rate, and now at that time what we had this fixed exchange rate. Since we had this fixed exchange rate, people were not able to what we call there was no fixed way what we call the exchange rate, the rate at which Indian currency was exchanged with foreign currency was pretty much fixed. So that was one of the shortcoming that used to happen at that time. So then again we were in import dependent countries. We were importing lot of crude oil. Apart from that, we were also our capital good industry was not that much developed. So basically, due to this, what we call fixed import cost that we are having due to prominent items such as capital goods and crude oil, the economy was very much in a fragile situation. Our social spending was also pretty much high. So what happened was popularly known as the balance of payment crisis. In balance of payment crisis, what occurs is that a country is unable to pay its, what we call unable to pay its exigencies, its outstanding exigencies in economic terms, in financial terms, when it comes to availability of dollar. So basically, we were unable to have sufficient amount of dollar to import the basic goods that we need. The term that is popularly used is known as import cover. So basically, one has to understand that the import cover is the measure of how strong is our what we call balance of payment situation. I must share one of the important facts when it comes to balance of payment situation. It is that currently India has around $400 billion of foreign reserves. So that actually shows from a point at 1991 where we had nearly near depleting stage of foreign exchange. We have come very far, and now we have a very strong capital resources when it comes to foreign capital, foreign currency. So apart from that, there's a request for the readers that this please what we call look into the internet and comment, put it in the comment section that what are the ways through which we keep our what we call RBI, what we call keep foreign exchange, what we call in what terms we actually have what we call storage of what we call a currency, a storage of storage of fixed currency, so as to cater to the balance of payment. uh, so let's move to the important what you call impact when globalization actually occurred. The new era globalization was what we call allowed, or what was allowed to actually happen in India in the form of new economic policy. The architect of the new economic policy at that time was Finance Minister Sri Manmohan Singh, who later became the Prime Minister of India. The government at that time came up with numerous changes in economic front, and there were subsequent changes in the social and political realm too. The new economic policy introduced in 1991 was primarily known as first generation reforms, while the subsequent reforms, what we call such as labor reforms, which is required to sustain the first generation reforms, is popularly known as second generation reforms. You must have come across these terms while you are reading the newspaper. So let's now move to the economic impact when it comes to globalization in India. So basically, when it comes to economic impact, the primary what we call economic change that happened, it was what we call liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Here I would like to note an important, very important point in which the liberalization was existing, the globalization what we call also was existing. However, what actually changed primarily, it was the privatization. When we talk about a foreign investment, the what we call what popularly known as what we call foreign, of course when it comes to there are foreign investment in terms of investment from foreign agency, foreign country. There existed such tie-up even before what we call 1991. Popularly, we had very great what we call exchange with Russia with respect to Germany when it comes to even what we call setting up of nuclear plants. So basically, their investment was there not only in nuclear plants. We had investment in terms of for what we call foreign exchange, even in electricity, electric power plant, hydro power plant, steel plant as well. So basically, and globalization in terms of did existed, and what we call foreign reserve was being pumped into India even before 1991. So was the case of liberalization also. When the government came to recognize there are certain change, problem that might be anticipated in the what upcoming area region, upcoming what we call years, starting from 6th 7th 5-year plan itself, the government of India tried to provide a space for the private industry to come in. However, the degree and again the pace at which it was done after 1991 reforms is notable, and henceforth it is primarily known as the LPG era. Again, I must note that so I would like to share my personal experience here, that in 2017 when I was writing mains, I couldn't study any of the world history topics. However, when I went through previous year paper, I was able to note that most of the questions are based on current affairs topics. So henceforth, what I did was that I utilized what we call my current affairs knowledge to come up with topics which could be related to world history. For example, there was death of Lee Kuan Yew, who is popularly known as the founder of Singapore. Then there was the case of death of Fidel Castro. Similarly, there were the 100 years of what we call First World War was completed. So all these things were quite much related and were in the news. So what I did was that I did what popularly known as smart work, in which I only studied these few topics. I was pretty much lucky in that year, where I was able to answer the question of Malay Peninsula, which was actually related to the death of President Lee Kuan Yew. And one must note there that Malay Peninsula is made up of two important countries, and it is Malaysia and Singapore. So you must, you could now realize that how much it is important to even have a correlation between not only current affairs topic alone. One must also know that how much relation current affairs topic could have with world history topic as well. So here I would like to note one important thing is that LPG era is become very important because LPG reforms has already completed 25 years. So basically, if you go through previous articles on various newspaper, you would actually come across articles where people have what we call discussed in details how the 25 years of LPG has worked out. So that is something one must be knowing. So let's talk about the important impact of what we call globalization. As I've already talked that uh, liberalization and globalization was something that was very much prominent and existed even before what we call the 1991 economic reforms. However, privatization was something that government of India went for the first time. Privatization would include the important form of privatization would include what the popular what we call public sector undertakings being their shares being sold out to private entities. So there were forms of sale in which some were a strategic sale. The strategic sale is where the sale of what we call shares is more than 49%. The government share reduces to 49% or below, through which the government loses the control over management as well. So apart from that, there are other kind of sales in which there is only share sale, or making at least 25% of the PSU shares public or listed. So these are certain forms of what we call privatization that government of India went for the first time after the new economic policy. There were also certain what we call macroeconomic and microeconomic changes. So I would request the viewers to write down the changes in detailed in terms of what we call detailed divided in terms of what we call the macroeconomic changes that were taken and the microeconomic changes that were taken after the starting of LPG era. It's a request, and I will review every one of your answer later in the comment section. So that with that done, I would like to talk about what we call the privatization of India, as I've already told. So there were what we call what there were certain region actually the government has to go for. All this thing is basically, if you could understand that why do market mechanism exist. The very existence of market mechanism is based on the principle that what is called as the individual hand policy. The individual hand policy is when the government what we call is when usually what we call what we call the resources get reutilized or what we call allocated to economic sectors which are performing with greater efficiency. So basically that is why liberalization, privatization is required. Privatization actually frees up the great amount of resources that have been what we call that was what we call that existed, with respect to the PSU, who were not utilizing it really well. So basically, when they were not utilizing it well, the government, had to sell it out so that the resources can be reallocated to other, social sector as well as what we call corporate sector. Here I have a request again to the viewers that please write down what are the forms in which disinvestment of, what we call disinvestment occurs in India. You could actually come across various kind of what we call funds that have been created so as to manage this process of disinvestment. And one must also note that every year there is a target for the government to complete when it comes to in every budget when it comes to disinvestment. So disinvestment henceforth becomes a very important issue. Well, now let's move to the critique of this, economic, reforms that was brought. Prominent critique, which I could actually take away from, various resources I have already noted down. First of all, again, I would like to, give some idea to the viewers that please go through the class 11 economic development book, class 11, book of economy. There you could actually, get a very great and very succinct snapshot of what economy of India has been in 1947 and before, and how it has, what we call transformed to the economy that we see. It's a very wonderfully written book, and it is a great resources for aspirants who are preparing for UPSC as well. So let's and that is what, the first two, what we call the first two critique is actually being taken from what we call the very book itself. So basically, one of the major critique when it comes to effect of, globalization, especially the economic reforms, has been that the agriculture sector was, what we call, got its lost its importance in terms of government policy. The government, what we call public expenditure, it's a very important term, and one must know is that the public, it's, what we call expenditure when it comes to agriculture, become very low. And that's why the fixed, capital formation is a very important term. And I would request the viewers again that please, go through its definition and let me know what it means in the comment section. So basically, fixed capital formation is one of the, what we call, important thing that actually, declined after the coming of globalization, especially the new economic reforms. So basically, that is where what is considered as, drawback when it comes to economic impact of globalization. I would like to note that the fixed capital, such as, investment when it comes to dams, when it comes to, what we call tube wells, decreased from the government and changed to more towards the private sector. So private sector usually, works on profit generation, and henceforward the, what we call, the farmers who were at the lower end were not able to afford this, what we call technological amenities. So apart from that, another sector where we faced some issues was the social expenditure. I must note here that, whenever at the time when, before the new economic policy of what we call 1991, the taxation was pretty much high. It was exorbitant, which we can call, as a result of which there was a high, what we call, there was a high tax collection, and henceforward the social expenditure was cumulatively high too. However, once the tax collection decreased, when the, what we call, the customs, duty, and as well as, the normal corporate tax, as well as, individual tax decreased, the, amount of revenue that was, what we call, that the government used to get from the tax collection decreased, and henceforward the social expenditure, such as expenditure on health, education, information, and so on, decreased to great extent. And this is something we can add as the second, what we call, critique to the economic impact of globalization. Apart from that, I would like to talk about some of the current, some of the critique from the current scenario, and those includes technology, social media, and West generation. When it comes to technology, I would like to especially talk about defense. One of the region we, what we call, there has been a greater emphasis on making India in India, especially in defense, is because of the lack of indigenous production when it comes to high-tech defense equipment. the defense expenditure, most of it goes into what we call buying up equipments from foreign, from US, UK and France, such as, due to which and there is a lack of, indigenous defense capability. Though basically, one must understand that the technology, usually comes at a cost. They have associated, what we call challenges, and especially when it is the question of security, where, there is a chance that our security too could be compromised. So it is very much important that we come up with, a very good defense manufacturing policy in which indigenous defense capability, manufacturing capability is increased. Here again, there is a request to the readers that please write about the new defense policy that was unveiled in 2014, the new defense procurement policy. Let me know in the comment section. I will review it personally. So let's move to the next section, the critique, and it is social media. So social media overall has become one of the, what we call very problematic area when it comes to what we call economic impact, basically because the most of the tech giant, most of the social media giants are not based in India. So question of, fake news, the question of, what you call setting up, fixing accountability is a very important term which we usually use in when it comes to GS4 ethics. So basically, fixing accountability, fixing again taxation, and again, what we call the data protection and privacy, especially after the right to, privacy judgment, in which, privacy was granted as a fundamental right under Article 21. So basically, it becomes a concern for the government to regulate the social media, and that is one of the important, critique when it comes to globalization. Another important critique which I would like to talk about is West generation. If you are, what you call, you must have noted that how, the first world countries who generate West to a greater degree, have very high cost when it comes to what we call treatment of West. So basically, the e-waste that is generated and the plastic waste that is generated are usually sent to third world countries for the cheaper, rate at which they are what we call recycled. They are the cheaper rate at which they are treated. So the third world countries effectively become the dumping ground of the first world countries West. So that actually, causes so many harms to the people who are involved in the process of waste treatment, and the environment impact cannot be counted, counted away. So basically, all this thing leads to a greater amount of, what we call problem when it comes to waste generation in, what we call third world countries. Here I have a request to the users that please write about, what we call the new West, what we call new e-waste policy, as well as the plastic policy. Please read it about in the what we call from the internet, and let me know your thought on the same. So let's move to the other, important, what we call next important section, and it is what we call as the social impact of what we call the social impact of globalization. The social impact of globalization is very important dimension to study, because it is more current, more what we call related to what our topic is, that is society and social issues in India. So basically, social impact of globalization cannot be denied. If you are sitting there and if you are able to observe, you would yourself be able to come up with various impact that the globalization had on, in a society. I have a request to the viewers that please write, the social impact of globalization that they could observe around them in the comment section. It is also a very important topic when it comes to the interview, because you could be asked to give from your own experience the changes that they have seen in the changes that you have seen in the society, especially after the coming up of globalization. So that is something could be asked in the interview as well. So let's talk about the migration. Basically, if I would like to talk about migration, I would like to highlight first the global issues of migration. Migration has become a global, what issues, which now is also become a heated debate when it comes to the United Nations organization. We have seen the, what we call cases of huge migration when it comes to areas of northern Africa, who are pretty much war torn and have, what we call have a what we call very bad living condition, where people are moving toward what we call Europe. And there has been, if you could recollect, the migration was one of the region due to which the Brexit had occurred. It is a global phenomenon, and it's impacting local policy, local politics to a very great extent. Let's move on to what it is called as internal migration. I have to here pause and talk about migration first of all. So if we talk about the census definition of migration, if a person is placed in a place which is not his birth, it is said to have he or she is said to have migrated. So basically that is how you could define migration. So let me talk about the amount of internal migration that is occurring in India. I would like to here make is rough map of India to give a what we call general description of the migration trend. So basically when we talk about the what we call when we talk about the hinterland, when we talk about the hinterland of India, the hinterland people are moving toward the coastal areas when it comes to migration, internal migration. And the people from what we call coastal areas, where what we call the things have already been what we call these areas which has already been stabilized, are now moving towards Gulf countries and US and UK and so on. So here we could actually, from the map of India, which is very important tip when it comes to framing of answers, you could actually mark the various kinds of internal and external migration that is happening. So basically map is a wonderful resource to actually utilize when it comes to showcasing, when it comes to depicting easily what the impact that any what we call any phenomenon is having on a spatial basis on India. So that is something you could actually talk about. The next important impact is the flight from agriculture. Flight from agriculture can be noticed from the what we call if we look at the census data or reports, where we could see the percentage of people who are employed when it comes to agriculture are shrinking. So basically the amount of people who are what you call employed in what you call agriculture are shrinking. If they are to of that amount when it was what you call before what we call my new economic policy or globalization, now it is reduced to only this certain amount. So that actually shows in this way I'm actually showcasing how to write answer and utilize graph, Venn diagram and other things, graphical representation to actually present your answer in a very wonderful manner. So flight from agriculture has been due to multiple reasons, such as first of all the agriculture crisis that we are facing, then yes of course the stagnation of rural income, due to which people are not able to earn very in a good way, then yes of course the very mindset in which the son of a farmer doesn't want to be engaged in farming. There is a mindset has been set in which people had rushed towards what we call the white collar or blue collar jobs, and tend to move away from agriculture. So all these things could be actually well captured in what we call as flight from agriculture. I would also talk about how this is impacting what we call when it comes to this is also impacting when it comes to what we call the rural to urban migration. What we call the rural to urban migration also is occurring due to the very same phenomenon. What is happening is that most of the time, as people are moving from agriculture, what we call more we are what we call moving toward what we call the urban centers. So that's, if you could go through the census, you would see distinctive change, very clear change, marked change when it comes to what we call census showing the percentage of people who are living in urban center. It is now being reported that by 2050 nearly 50% of Indians would be living in urban center. If you could recollect from our last to last lecture, I have noted how that or in the upcoming lecture in which we would be talking about the problems associated with what we call urbanization, or actually I would be talking about the problem associated with urbanization in greater detail in our what we call upcoming lectures. but one must know that that is one reason why the what we call urbanization also become a very important phenomenon which needs to be regulated and very well planned, so that we are able to provide them basic issue, basic what we call facilities everywhere. I would actually like to note here what we call a popular idea in which we want what we call mobile, what we call mobility when it comes to what we call social security features. Social security features, usually social security features are quite much associated, are much associated with what we call what we call, are very much associated, when the actually what we call the social security features are not much mobile. Even when it comes to from one state to another, for example, if you're moving from Kerala, you're moving from Jharkhand to Kerala, you might lose your social security benefits that you are actually getting in the home state of Jharkhand. So basically we have to first start with basic mobility of what we call social security, such as food and ration and everything, so that people are able to live a life with dignity even when they have migrated. And this is one of the global theme when it comes to what it is popularly known as migration with dignity, continuous, smooth and dignified migration, which is the key tagline when it comes to what we call a global talk of on migration. Let's move to the next very topic, which is again very important here. I would like to share another pro tip, that whenever it comes to impact of globalization into various any kind of impact, I would say that you have an idea of what are the important institution that is in present. For example, if it is economy, you could talk about in broader framework in terms of macroeconomic. When it is or microeconomic, when it is society, you could actually talk about the various institutions such as family, education, health, and so on. And as we move toward polity, we have again a set of institutions. So basically this kind of formula, if you have already developed, so not only globalization, you would be able to answer question which are what we call from any what we call not only globalization, from other phenomenon also. If you have been asked about how it is going to impact, you could easily answer if you have certain kind of formulas set in your mind. So let's talk about the family. Basically, as I have mentioned, the family impact on family varies from class basis. If we talk about people from lower strata, usually they have migrated from rural center to urban center. On the other hand, when it comes to upper strata, such as rich people, or what we call ambitious middle class, which is people, they tend to what we call go for migration from India to other country. That has been seen when actually we could see the kind of what we call trend that has been when it comes to an area such as Telangana and Andhra. I must note that I actually should mention that the Telugu is the third most what we call spoken languages in US today. What we call, so that actually shows that the amount of migration that has occurred. So, and again the kind of impact that family has to happen. For example, there are scenarios in which what we call the elderly parents have been left behind in the rural areas, and the what we call the working what we call working couple usually tend to move to what we call urban center. Not only that, you could actually see the what we call idea of a functionally joint family existing, in which structurally the family might be in different cities and living a nuclear family lifestyle. However, they are still attached to their rural areas, where they are holding their asset in terms of as a joint. So that actually shows that the asset holding is functionally joint. On the other hand, the family structure is structurally nuclear. So that actually shows the what we call the distinctive what we call mixing up of two kind of what we call nature of family in India. So I would now suggest there are numerous what we call impact on family, and I would suggest the viewers to write down those impact when it comes to family. uh, let's talk about next, that is gender dynamics and globalization. I would like to share again a pro tip here, that whenever it comes to what we call any kind of what we call phenomenon, you have to evaluate it from gender dynamics. I would like to give a clue. The basically, if you look at Article 14, Article 14 has explicitly talked about the fundamental right to equality. However, the Article 15 has clearly stated in another what we call clause, where women and children have been talked about differently and talked about preferential treatment. So basically that shows that not only constitution has also taken care of the gender dynamics. So if you are talking about social issues, it is a very wonderful thing to talk about the gender dynamics and the phenomenon. So that's why I've kept this topic, the gender dynamics and globalization, a separate what we call topic to talk about in this social impact. Gender dynamics in this, again a pro tip is that please talk about the third gender as well. It's very important. Ever since the judgment have come from Supreme Court on various issues, such as the Nalsar judgment, in which the third gender was recognized as a what we call third gender was recognized, and this decriminalization of section 377 as well, that actually shows that to a certain degree the acceptance among the echelons of government has started when it comes to what we call the third gender as well. Here I have a question for the viewers. I would request them, please write about the various state government initiative. I would repeat, the state government initiative towards the third gender that has been popularly taken. I would like to give you a hint. You could talk about how Kerala has separate one economic job policy, what we call for the third gender, transgender. The Kochi Rail Metro is an example where the third gender has been employed. Maharashtra has a separate welfare board for this third gender, and so on has the what we call case of Tamil Nadu and other states. So I would request the viewers to come up with a good list and post it in the comment section. So let's now move towards the actual topic, that is gender dynamics and globalization. So here I would like to talk about some of the what we call some of the what we call data stats and figures that has actually come up. So basically when it comes to gender dynamics, basically we have seen that usually women tends to migrate whenever they have marriage is the biggest region for migration of women. We still have what we call as patrilocal form of marriage system in residence, in which woman once get married to her husband has to leave her home and move to what we call the husband home. As a result of which there has been high degree of migration when it comes to what we call marriage based migration when it comes to women. So that actually shows that gender dynamics and globalization migration does have a good correlation. Not only that, when we talk about what we call the jobs that has been available, it is called that the IT job, which is considered a desk job, has been made available to the women. The women, the participation of women, especially when it comes to the IT sector, has been very significant. And IT sector just came to came to boom in India only because due to globalization. So that actually shows that on one hand, women, traditionally their, what we call the challenges that they were facing due to their gender continued. At the same time, new opportunities also have been provided by the coming up of globalization. That actually shows that there exists a dichotomy. There exists a paradox when it comes to gender dynamics and globalization. Here again, I have a request to the viewers that please talk about the globalization and how it is impacting the third gender, in India. So that would be a task for everyone who is viewing this lecture. So, and again, the another form of social impact is the protest. Large scale protest has been possible due to the globalization as well. I'd like to hear specifically note about the what you call the Kundankulam protest that occurred in Tamil Nadu against the Kundankulam power plant. Kundankulam power plant is the joint venture of Government of India and Government of Russia. So basically in that there was a huge protest, what we call when it comes to the environment impact of what we call the setting up of nuclear plant. Actually, what we call the government reports, especially from the intelligence bureau, has shown that the global, what we call think tank were present only to sabotage the developmental process when it comes to what we call developmental process in what we call third world countries, only so as to satisfy to their own national interest. Come Since it was a project being sponsored by the government of Russia, other governments across globe who tend to have some kind of friction when it comes to India Russia relationship, or Russia, they what we call they manipulated the people there, and they for what we call motivated them to protest, so that what we call the development process is sabotaged. That actually shows that protest, what we call the protest, not only good form. For example, environmental protest, the very famous Chipko movement, it is said to be the first of the environmental protest, mass environmental protest, and it has appeal worldwide. So form of protest has not only transformed from India to other part. However, certain uh, improper form, or in what we call malified intention have been manifested in protest in India as well. So again, as I said, there are just two sides of each of the one what we call each of the impact that we are going to talk. So something has been good and something has been bad. So one could actually write in a very well depth on how the social impact has occurred due to globalization. This globalization, very globalization topic could be also what we call a topic for essay as well. So I would request the viewers to prepare this topic, come up with good essays and quote, and a good introduction and conclusion as well, to prepare for this topic in respect of essay as well. So let's move to the next what we call impact, and that is what we call what we call the political impact when it comes to what we call globalization. So here I would like to talk about the political impact of globalization. The political impact of globalization are as follows. What we call the changing nature of governance is first of all the first what we call impact of political impact of globalization. Here again, Brexit become the popular example. You must have noticed that in the June what we call June, there is going to be poll in UK, only because the current government has been very ineffective, or current government, the what we call what we the government what we call of government of Theresa May. Miss Theresa May has been proved to be a failure in terms of handling what we call the Brexit negotiation. So that actually shows that the government what we call is being affected due to migration issues. And again, migration issues has been an important what we call important for format of important policy, important discussion and debate during what we call in national election as well. There are a popular son of soil movement, as well as what we call migration, what son of soil movement, and then again the what we call citizenship amendment bill, popularly known as CAB, which actually impacted the northeast election to a great extent. That actually shows that political what we call politics and governance are actually changing due to migration issue. Again, as I said, governance and administration, it is about decision making. Then one could also talk about the portability of social security scheme, which needs to be implemented, so that a good nature of governance, a good governance could occur to people who are migrating too. So that is something that we could actually talk about when it comes to changing nature of governance. I would request the viewers to come up with more number of examples that they could actually think about when it comes to what we call changing nature of governance. So let's move to the next topic, and that is pooled sovereignty model. So when it comes to pooled sovereignty model, I have to say that what we call the pooled sovereignty model is being successful not only what we call at global scale, it is also successful at national scale too. The popular formation of national scale, we have example as GST Council. It shows that when it shows that what we call how what we call the sovereignty or the power has been pooled so that we could actually work for the governance. And then yes, again, when it comes to global, we have the United Nation, for various projects in, and again, the famous what we call Paris, deal. The Paris deal is an example where, for combating climate change, the government across the world has come together to come up with a pool sovereignty model in which each and everyone would be auditing other persons, what we call format of reaching towards the climate goal. Again, sustainable developmental goal or MDG are similar example where there is a certain degree of give and take when it comes to what we call the amount of sovereignty, amount of independence in terms of decision making that is being exercised for a greater good, for the what we call as global common. So that is the popular pool sovereignty model that we can talk about. So then again, I would like to, there has been certain degree of problem. For example, as again, the example of what we call Brexit, Britain exit from European Union is also one of the drawback when it comes to pool sovereignty model. The European Union become a what we call a meta government over the what we call the national government, due to which the national government had some kind of certain degree of restriction when it comes to protecting its currency, protecting its border. So when they were not able to perform these two basic function, there was some backlash to the pool sovereignty model as well. There is a popular saying in by Theresa May, Theresa May, ma'am, which I would like to what we call talk about the PM Theresa May. She said that if you call yourself as the citizen of the world, then you do not understand what is the meaning of citizenship. So I request the viewers to actually give their viewpoint on this very statement, on what she actually mean, or what do you actually what we call understand by this very statement, and how far do you think it is correct or wrong. So let's move to the very next important impact that is actually happening due to globalization, and that is political funding. This is actually taken from one of the current affairs topic, due to, and that is why I'm going to talk about India as well as Australia. In India, recently there was a amendment in the foreign currency regulation act, which actually exempted what we call political parties from taking funding from outside India. So basically there were certain, and it was given effect retrospectively only to save the political parties who have violated the foreign currency regulation act to take funding from companies who were foreign entities. So that actually shows how things has what we call get impacted when it comes to political funding. So I have a request to the viewers that please come up with pros and cons of political funding when it comes to foreign political funding in India. Do you think it would impact what we call, it would make the government of India one what we call bit shackled, they will limited when it comes to thinking about best of the national interest, if they are taking fund from foreign what we call if the political party is taking fun from foreign countries. So let me know all this in the comment section. I would like to hear talk about the case of Australia, but I must pause and give a hint that what I am going to talk about in Australia has been one of the negative implication. However, what we call, you should not only in the question that I have requested, should not only talk about the negative implication only. So in Australia, what happened is that the legislator became very much alarmed due to the what we call a massive form of what we call interference that was done by mega Chinese company in terms of policy making, due to the amount of fund that they were pumping in the political parties of Australia. As a result of which the government of Australia came up, the parliament there came up with a bill and subsequently an act which completely banned external what we call foreign funding to the parties in Australia.
So that actually shows that yes, of course, countries who are pretty much developed also become very vulnerable when it comes to external political funding. So that is where we have to think about the policy that we are going to have when it comes to political funding, especially foreign political funding. And yet again, I would like to request the viewers to go into various reports that have come across with respect to political funding when it comes to what we call Indian election scenario. It is also that it's what we call read would enable you to tackle question when it comes to GS2 as well as essay and ethics paper. So once this is over, let's move to the next slide, and that is what we call the impact. I would like to, as I said, usually at the end of the lecture, we would be discussing what are the impact, or what your one question in which I would be giving you the framework of the answer, and you would be requested to what we call write the answer and put it in the comment section. And luckily today we are going to discuss two important questions, and both the question are not only important from mains perspective, they are also something that could be thought about when it comes to interview as well as essay. So the first question that we are going to talk about is the discuss the impact of globalization on family. See, as I told you, introduction and conclusion has to be framed simultaneously, concurrently, at least in thought process itself, because that will ensure that your ideas are very much well what we call sandwiched between introduction and conclusion. It actually captures the imagination of the invigilator very well. So yet again, for introduction you could go with the definition of globalization, you could go with the definition of family, and yes, of course, if you have definition based of what we call impact, then you could actually just summarize the impact that we have talked about in the body and in the conclusion. So in the body, I would again talk about various types of impact that has occurred. So prominent impact is what we call, when it comes to family, it has been changing of joint family to nuclear family. Yet again, you have to showcase the important paradox that we have talked about, where structurally the family remain nuclear, has become nuclear, however functionally it tend to remain joint still. Other impact of globalization that we could talk about is that I would like to here actually mention a case study. During the Chennai floods, there was a huge complaint about there was a huge uproar about old what you call family member being left behind by the their wards who are living outside the country and earning somewhere else. Basically they become very vulnerable when it comes to their mitigation, or their what we call their what we call they were very vulnerable when the disaster hit the what we call their areas, because they have problems when it comes to mobility, they have difficulty when it comes to usage of technology, reporting and everything. So that becomes a pretty much challenge. Apart from that, I would like to talk about this social media platform, which is not only today it is bringing a very extended family also in the decision making platform. There, although as again I said, although the society, the family is turning more nuclear when it comes to what we call decision making. We have WhatsApp platform, we have groups in WhatsApp, we have groups in Facebook, where siblings, where what we call elder members of our family, they tend to discuss things which are going to what we call take opinion, which lot long ago was not possible. Communication has enabled, has provided such a platform when it comes to globalization. Again, I'd like to talk about the increasing what we call impact on what we call family function. Previously, family was the place where initial what we call education, of initial socialization also used to happen. Today, there has been there exist agencies which tend to provide such kind of facilities. For example, not only schooling, you have today what we call preschool as well, where you would be taught where you, then again there is the culture of babysitting which is coming up, which is actually providing very good space for the working parents
to go outside and earn, and at the same time take care of what we call children by someone else, so by someone that they have employed. So that basically shows that the family function, the function that the elder what we call members of the society used to perform, have decreased. However, again, I would like to note one important thing, that if you would look closely, if you would observe closely, that although on one hand the function of what you call family is decreasing, it is being taken over by agencies, on the other very hand the family function is increasing as well. So basically it has been observation by what we call popular, what we call sociologists as well. What is happening is that although agencies such as preschool exist for the service to the parents now are more vigilant when it comes to what we call, they have to what we call employ greater amount of time due to the homework, or due to the extra activities that are suggested by the preschool to be undertaken in the home. So that actually shows that although agencies are able to take away some function, it actually has to give some preparatory function to family again. So basically it's a give and take that is going on when it comes to impact of globalization on family. So those are a few important topics which I felt that I must mention when it comes to impact. I would request the viewers to write the question in details about the impact of globalization. Now I would like to talk about one of my this question I have framed on my own actually, and this is something that I was thinking about during my interview, that it could be one of the what you call possible interview question. However, it is not only a possible interview question. Again, it is a possible question in economy, it is a possible in GS3, it is a possible question when it comes to GS2, what we call law and everything, and it's a possible question in essay as well. So the question that I'm going to discuss about is the challenges in digital economy. So digital economy is economy which is based on again 0 1 bit and byte. So basically economy which is more what we call dependent on digital transaction, that is digital economy. So what are the important challenges I have tried to talk about is in the what we call the slide. So basically what we call the important challenges are, first of all, it is the taxation. The taxation is something that we could actually what we call talk about, the taxation and privacy matter. So first of all, it's the taxation. Here I would like to talk about the term called significant economic presence. This term was introduced in the budget recently. Basically it was done so that we are able to tax those economy which are based outside, however their massive revenue is coming from third world countries, and that is the case of what we call Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat, and so on. So taxation becomes an important challenge. The second challenge, that is privacy. Indian government, and we are lucky to have live in India where privacy has been considered as a fundamental right. So due to which now that privacy is a fundamental right, and it is not so the case of other countries, we have this what is called as incompatibility of laws. That incompatibility actually makes it tedious for what we call the company of the authorities here to actually what we call enforce this judgment over the companies. I would like to mention this very important what we call general data protection regulation that is being imposed in the EU, that one could go through to understand how much privacy is important, and what steps that a country or a what we call region could take to ensure that the privacy of the person is secured. Next, something that I would like to talk about is fixing accountability. Basically what happens is that the nature of crimes that is occurring in digital economy is transboundary. To fix account, you could be sitting somewhere and you could be actually using the server of some other countries. You could be using the ID of someone of some person from different third countries, and still you would be hacking into something that is in the fifth countries, and so on. So the chain is so long, the nature of crime is so much what we call is what we call spreading across the what we call states and countries, due to which fixing accountability becomes very much tough. So it's a very blurred identity which leads to this problem of fixing accountability. Second important thing, fourth important thing, that actually challenge in digital economy is the fake news. Of course, the menace of fake news, the post-truth era, which we talk about, is too much, and it is causing, a problem ranging from death of person at individual scale to toppling of government at the national scale, as well as what worsening of ties between two government as well in international relations. So it has, you could see it has impact from individual to international scale. Then again, the local economy and small and medium enterprises. Here I would like to talk about some of the important thing that one must know about small and medium enterprises. So basically, around 40% of the export in India is being provided by the small and medium enterprises. They also, tend to employ 11 crore people, or around more than that, I believe. You should cross check the data, are employed in small and medium enterprises. So that actually shows that the local economy and small and medium enterprise plays a very important role when it comes to national economy. When it comes to digital economy, they are actually causing huge disruption when it comes to the local economy and SME. Now SME, which have to what we call face what we call challenges from what we call at global scale, and if they are not able to come up with new technology, if they are not able to update their technology, they tend to face attrition. So that's why government has to step in, has to provide some kind of cushion to the local economy and SME, so that they are able to what we call a challenge. They are able to compete with other country, other what we call companies at working at global scale in this digital economy. So basically, there needs to be provided in what we call what a positive kind of what we call positive reinforcement to this economy is required. So in brief, I have talked about what are the challenges that occurs when it comes to digital economy, and those include taxation, privacy, fixing accountability, fake news, local economy, and small and medium enterprises problems. So with this, I would like to what we call end the lecture. So basically, one has to understand that what we call one has to what we call note that that we have understood, we have talked about what we call the economic impact, the political impact, the social impact of globalization. I have taken an entire full lecture for this only because one could understand that it is a very important topic with respect to essay, with respect to what we call GS as well, not only GS1, GS2, GS3 as well, as well as GS4, and what we call optional subject or essay as well. So basically it becomes a very important topic, and henceforth I have talked about globalization in very details. As here I would like to end the lecture today. We would be discussing the next topic, and it is what we call population and associated issues and poverty in the upcoming lecture. Tomorrow I would be taking the lecture in this very time, that is 7 p.m. See you tomorrow. Thank you and good night.